Hello and welcome to a deck profile for Youthberk Fantome. This is a low tier deck, but one that is still surprisingly good in the sense that it hits very big numbers and thus can just steal games sometimes if you manage to also hit crits. This deck did not top at all in Japan, so it's not really suited for large scale competitive events like BCS events. I would recommend playing this at your locals for more casual events, 4-round weekly tournaments and the like. This deck functions very similarly to how Keter Youthberk did. It's a mid-range deck that has a gimmick where after you swing with your Vanguard, you re-ride from hand into an alternate form that has powerful effects. This deck does basically the same thing, except that we are in Dragon Empire, which is going to change a little bit how the deck functions, in that the deck is less focused around plussing to hand or things like that, and more focused on retire and power. So, without any further ado, let's get into the list. We'll begin with the ride line. You have to play Desolation of Loneliness Youth as your starter. The rest of the ride line mentions it. Then we have Will of the Destruction Dragon Youth. This, when you ride over that 0, you look at the top 7, you choose a Youthberk or Crimson Moon card from among them, reveal it and put it in hand, and shuffle. I think the other Phantom decks are getting ways to hard search a Crimson Moon, so it's a bit weaker for us, but the upside is that you can hit your Youthberks at least. And then we have Crimson Wrath Dragslayer Youth. This card, when you ride over it with the 3, you Energy Blast 3 and choose a grade 2 or greater card from your drop and put it to hand. And then we have Youthberk Dragforce Arms Phantom. This card has the Drag Dress skill, where after your Vanguard attacks, you ride a drag form from hand, and if you did, you get to re-ride into this at the end of turn, or you have to re-ride into this at the end of turn, rather. And then it has an Act skill. You can discard a card from hand once returned to look at the top 3 cards of the deck, choose up to 1 drag form in its name, put it to hand, or choose a grade 2 or less card and call it to rear. And then of the remaining cards in that 3-card pile, you can either discard all of them, or you can put them on the bottom of the deck in any order. And both halves of that are actually kind of useful. Let me adjust the light a bit. Both halves of that skill are useful in the sense that if you're in the super late game and you're close to deck out, you can actually manipulate your deck to try to hit triggers, especially if you saw triggers in that pile. Alternately, if you are trying to build up your scaling to get more pressure fast and the pile contains 2 dragons, you can just mill them. Because the third effect of this card is that at the beginning of your main phase, you get red text. When your Vanguard attacks, it gets 1k until end of that battle for each card in your drop with dragon in its race until end of turn. So that is going to start off small. Your first Vanguard swing is probably going to be just slightly above 13k. And then after turn 4 and onward, it's going to start rapidly getting higher because we're going to use triggers with dragon in the type line. So every time we guard, we're going to be building up our Vanguard's power. That means that it's not uncommon to have plus 10 by turn 4, which is pretty solid. That's going to make it a lot harder to pass your Vanguard. And then it just gets higher as the game goes on. However, the central tension of this deck, and the reason why it's not top tier, is that the really strong Dragon Empire cards are not dragons, which is funnily enough. This deck would really love to play Latifah and Shenri, for instance. Those would solve basically all the deck's problems, but those cards aren't dragons, so on and so forth. So, unfortunately, even actually, before I move off this point, even some of the Youthberk support cards that are really good are not dragons. So they kind of handicapped this deck in the design stage because they didn't make sure that all the cards were dragons. And Youthberk himself doesn't count as a dragon. He could have been type lined as a Dragon Slayer or something, but he is not. So your drag forms and your ride line and your copies of Persona Ride, if you discard or Soul Blast any of those, they don't count as dragons. So that means there's a lot of things that limit how fast the scaling can get. And on top of that, this deck doesn't have any other forms of major of like scaling or pressure or ways to survive into the late game for a long period of time. It doesn't have any like core defensive mechanics or anything. So the deck is clearly built around wanting to use this ability, but it doesn't have the tools to enable this ability to be as strong as it could be. So that's like one of the main weaknesses. The good news is that this deck is already getting support in set 16 in form of generic Phantom support, and is also a strong candidate for getting support printed directly for it. Youthberk typically has gotten, in the previous iterations of Youthberk, there's been multiple forms, all of which made the deck stronger, so I wouldn't be surprised if we see an alternate drag form for this deck in the near future. Getting into our main deck, we have 3 copies of Persona Ride for maximum pressure and for soul building, and then we have 4 copies of our only drag form that is out right now, Youthberk Drag Form Dynast. Even the original Keter Youthberk launched with one Revel Dress form in the trial deck and another one in the set that came out right after, so I'm surprised they only gave us 1 drag form for this, but we'll take it. This has the effect that in deck, if you reveal it for a... if you have a Vanguard with Youth in its name and this is revealed by a Crimson Moon, you can count this card as a Crimson Moon card, so we can use the Crimson Moon to add this to hand. That's basically what that does. And then, when this unit is placed on V by the drag dress ability, you perform all of the following. First, your front row rears get 5k, and if your opponent's Vanguard is 3 or greater, they get another 5k. Then you can counterblast 1 and give this unit back 1 drive, because it gets drive -2 from the drag dress ability. And then if your opponent's on grade 3, you also get +1 crit. Really good pressure. And then when this unit attacks, you bind 1 or more Crimson Moons, and you give your front row 5k, and you retire a number of your opponent's rear guards equal to the number of Crimson Moons you bound. You can bind up to 2, so you can retire 2 units, which is useful if your opponent has superior interceptors. Then your front row gets 5, and if you have 3 or more Crimson Moons bound, they get another 5k. So that means this card attacking alone can potentially result in your board having +20k, which is pretty strong overall. So we don't actually need boosters that badly, and it's not the end of the world if you don't get the most dragon scaling. This card is just really solid. However, this card basically reveals the other core problem with Youthberk, besides the fact that the good cards are not dragons, and that is that it's very piece reliant. You need to draw a Persona Ride every turn, and then a copy of this card every turn, and a Crimson Moon to be played every turn, both to help you build a board, and then to have a copy in the drop zone to bind for this skill. You can bind from hand, soul, or drop, but you don't want to bind from hand, and Crimson Moons are not going to end up in your soul in this deck. So if you don't get this sequence of 3 cards and then the Crimson Moon, you basically aren't doing anything. And that's a big problem. But if you get all 3, this deck is very high pressure. So it's basically, you should look at this as a high roll gambling deck. Then we have 4 copies of Crimson Moonlight. This is the more powerful of the 2 Crimson Moon cards. I do think you need to be playing these I have whiffed on this top 5 check so many times that if I didn't have the card draw, I would have a 0% win rate with this deck. So you play this if you have a Phantom Vanguard, and you look at the top 5 cards of your deck, you choose up to 1 Crimson Moon card and add it to hand, or you choose a card with grade less than or equal to your Vanguard and call it to R. So it's just going to help you build a board. It's a really nice effect. And then it has that when it's in damage, you can just put it into drop and put the top card of your deck into damage to replace it, and it cannot be bound other than by the effect of your Phantom ability, and once it's in bind zone, it can't be touched. Yeah, that's the... Oh, grab one of the cards. Yep, that's Crimson Moon. This is the 3-card combo you need for every turn from turn 3 onwards. So, now we get to the grade 2s. We have Drag Ritter Habitable Zone. This card has the effect on it's discarded from hand for the ride while riding from the ride deck. So not during the ride phase. It's specifically for the action of riding from the ride deck. If you have a Phantom Vanguard, you can Soul Blast 1 or Energy Blast 3 to search your deck for a Crimson Moon and put it in hand. And then when this is put on Guardian from hand, if you have a Phantom Vanguard, you can Counterblast 1 or Energy Blast 3 and draw a card. So it's basically like the Energy Cyclers that we got at the start of D format, except tuned for Phantom decks specifically. Overall, it's pretty essential to play these. I play the full 4 because I never want to brick on Crimson Moons, because this deck needs to do one or it doesn't get the additional power that the drag form needs in order to hit those big numbers. So it's very important to play these, and you want to mulligan for them aggressively. You want like 2 of them in your early hand or 3 in your early hand if you're going second. Although keep in mind that you're going to have to pay Soul Blast for these occasionally, because the grade 2 from our ride line requires us to Energy Blast 3 to get a grade 2 back from drop when we ride it over it with the 3. So realistically, you're only going to get to use 2 of these for your ride lines, maybe 3 if you're lucky. All right, then we have our Forlorn Hope Dragon. This is our best attacker. This card has the effect that when your Vanguard attacks, it gets plus 5k until end of turn, which means it's going to get at least plus 10 from the Youthberk's swinging. And then after the end of the battle it attacks, if you have a Vanguard placed by the Drag Dress ability, you can retire this unit and draw a card. So that's a pretty good effect. It's going to fill up the number of dragons on our drop. It's going to help build our hand up and potentially draw us into more dragons for more scaling. Yeah, this hits pretty solid numbers. It's our best card. Then we have 3 copies of Dragon Vortex Bully Aggro. When you discard these during the ride phase, they get called to R instead of going to the drop. And if you're on grade 2 or greater, they get called standing. If you're on grade 1, they get called rested. These are 10k boosters in the late game, which is really good. And they are also 10k interceptors once your opponent is on grade 3. And then when you're on grade 3, they get back row intercepted boost. Pretty solid generic card. This go in a lot of Dragon Empire decks. You don't technically have to play this, but it is a Dino Dragon, which means it contributes to our scaling, and its shield value, which means we aggressively want to use these to guard with in order to build up that dragon type scaling in the drop zone. So it's basically a perfect card for the deck. I would strongly recommend playing it and just getting the copies, even though they're a little pricey, because they're so good in so many Dragon Empire decks. Then we played 2 copies of Obliterate Dragon. This card is youth-specific support. It has the effect that if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard with Youthberk in its name, you can Soul Blast 2 cards with youth in their name to call this card from drop, and it gets 5k. And then it has, when this unit is placed on R, Counterblast 1, you look at the top 7 cards of the deck to choose up to 1 card with Youthberk in its name from among them, reveal it and put it to hand and shuffle, and if you whiffed, you countercharge. Pretty solid way to board build. We're fine discarding this card or milling it because it gets the call from drop, and we only need to play 2 because we're just going to keep reusing the same copy. Then we have 3 copies, getting to our grade 1s, 3 copies of Festival Cannon Dragon Dino Fest. This card has the effect that when it boosts, if your Vanguard is grade 3 or greater and your opponent does not have a rearguard in the same column as this unit gets plus 5k, making it a 13k booster. And then auto on R at the end of the battle to see it boosted if you have more rear guards than your opponent, or if your opponent's rear guard was retired this turn, which we will do with our drag form ability. You can bind this and look at the top 5 cards of your deck. Choose up to 1 grade 2 or greater unit card, or up to 1 non-sentinel Dino Dragon normal unit with a different card name from this card from among them. Reveal it and put it to hand and shuffle the deck. So this is useful in that it's going to compress us, and we are able to grab Youthberk forms with it, which is very important. You want to try to aggressively get all the Youthberks that you can, because if you damage any drag forms, that's just 1 fewer turn of attacking you have. Then we have 2 copies of Banishing Claw Dragon. This card has the effect that when it's discarded from deck or hand, other than during the battle phase, if you have a Youthberk Vanguard at grade 3 or greater, you can Soul Blast 1 and call this card to R. So this is nice just to have for the cost of discarding for this card's act skill, or if you mill for that top 3 check. And it just will call the board. We have enough soul for this to function. It's just a little bit more discard value. Surprisingly good. You could cut these for other things like Twin Cast or a fourth Belgiacro or something. It's really up to you, but I'd like this card at 2 copies. Then we have 1 copy of Summit Flare Dragon. If your G zone has no cards, this unit gets all of the following abilities. 1 is that as an act skill from hand, if you have a grade 3 or greater Vanguard, you can discard this card and put a total of 2 cards from your ride deck back into your ride deck from soul or drop, face up. And then you look at the top 7 cards from your deck. You choose up to 1 grade 3 or greater card with a different card name from your Vanguard from among them. Reveal it and put it in a hand and shuffle the deck. And if you did not reveal a card, you can put this card in your hand. So this is basically just a way to try to dig for the drag form if you've whiffed on it. And then it has, as an auto skill, when this is put on Guardian, if your opponent's drop has 4 or more cards, it gets 5k shield. And if they have a G zone, then it gets you get to bind a grade 3 or greater from soul or drop, and it gets plus 10k shield, making this really strong for guarding against stride decks. There's not that many of them right now, except for like the stall build of Night Rose, and occasionally you will see a stall Luard deck or someone still running around with Shiranui, but generally the G zone effect is not why we're here. We're here for the ability to check the top 7 for drag forms. Then we have 3 perfect guards. Normal unit PGs, just make sure they have dragon in the type line. And then we have an Elementaria. You have to play this in this format. And then we have our triggers, 4 heals. It doesn't matter what the heals are as long as they are dragons. Then we have 8 crits. Make sure again that all of your crits have a dragon in the type line. These effect crits are not really particularly useful for this deck, but occasionally you might need the soul for your that grade 1. But yes, 8 crits is important. And then we have 3 fronts. Unfortunately, both of the effect fronts are not dragons. One is a Stealth Fiend, and this one is a Blaze Maiden. So if you want to play the best fronts you can't have dragons. The shield fronts are pretty important for this deck, just to have a little bit more defense and to have some game going second. So I recommend playing these. If you really if you want to maximize your dragons, your options are to play one of the vanilla fronts. I have Stealth Dragon Jangoku here. A vanilla front is okay in that it's still just a 15k trigger and 10k to the front row. But it has dragon in the type line, so that's a little bit better than it would be normally. And then you can also play Flare Veil Dragon. This is the effect draw. It's a dragon, and it will have slightly more utility than a vanilla front, I think. But this deck does have deck out problems, so playing a draw is a bit risky. So I think the best call is just to accept that you can't play 100% dragons and play the 3 Paramas. Then we play Drag Veda as our over trigger. I believe, based on the way that Youthberk's drag dress skill is worded, that it's choose up to 1 drag form, and it's not a once per turn skill. So if you hit Drag Veda, you just choose 0 drag forms to ride into, and then you swing with Youthberk again, and then on the second swing you can drag dress. Drag Veda is still really solid even if you hit it on the drag dress turn, because even though you have 1 draw, it'll have crit built in already. And you can potentially bind another moon to get access to the full power effect again and make your rear guard stronger. I think that's not once per turn. I should check. It is once per turn, actually, so ignore what I just said. You can't do that. But yeah, Drag Veda is still good when you have crit. It's going to be really powerful. It's basically the best over trigger in the game. And there's a reason he keeps getting choice restricted with other abilities. So that's the deck. The attack pattern is extremely simple, to the point that there's not really much to show. It's really just you swing with Vanguard, you drag dress into that, and then you see what triggers you hit. You bind at least 1 moon. You're usually only going to bind 1 moon because you need to use a moon every turn. So it's a little risky to bind 2. But if all 4 moons are already public, then on the second swing on your Persona ride, it's often worth it to bind the 2 moons just to get up to that 3 moons in bind really fast. But then that means that you will run out of gas on your turn 5 for sure, instead of getting 2 more potential turns. You want to try to get, if this card is one of your rears, And then the rest of your board, you just call whatever you have. You're probably going to call this card from drop. And then, yeah, just guard aggressively to get those dragon scalings up. And you do this, you'll swing with your Vanguard, and then you'll re-ride, swing with your Vanguard, and you'll swing with your rear guards, and you'll assign triggers probably to your rears mostly, because Drag Dress is gonna erase the benefit from triggers. So if your opponent Tutor passes, it's usually not worth it to try to break the Tutor pass, unless doing so would win you the game immediately. So it's usually better to put them on the rears, which your opponent is gonna know. So, Youthberk's been around for a while. But that's the deck. It's very simple and straightforward to play. None of your cards have really complicated effects compared to other decks in the format. This deck really is just all about churning through the deck and compressing, getting as many dragons out of it and into the drop as possible by using their effects. And then just throwing 4 attacks with big numbers at the opponent. And if that works, you'll probably kill them on turn 4 or 5. If it doesn't, you'll probably deck out, honestly, before you lose the game, in my experience. I've lost a deck out with this deck a lot. But that's all for now, and I'll see you next time.